What are the horror stories that can happen in June? Whatever they may be, if you guys do want to get into the July horror stories, please send me an email at horrorstudio1@gmail.com. Without further ado, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 6 true scary stories of weird horror encounters that happened this month. When I was 14, back in 2007, around mid-June, my parents had gone out for the evening, and had left me alone, which in itself was a nice break. I was downstairs watching TV, and went up to the kitchen to make some food. I don't quite know what it was, but something just didn't feel right to me. Chalking it up to nothing, after getting something to eat, I head back downstairs and called a friend. It was about 7 now, and my parents would be back around 10. As I was talking to my friend, all of a sudden the line clicks. I try to get dial tone on the cordless and nothing works. Then, I hear a faint beeping from upstairs. It's the trouble light on the alarm keypad. Now I'm worried, not panicked, but worried. Then, I heard footsteps outside, and I remember there is cell backup on the alarm. I hit the button with the police badge on it, and hopes that alarms would scare whoever was outside away, and the siren went off. Grabbed my phone and dialed 911. We live on small acreage, so there is a neighbor not too far, but farther than someone in the city. I hid in my bedroom for what felt like hours, but was only about 15 minutes until I saw the police through the front door. My parents rushed home right away. There's a gray box on the side of the house where the phone line comes in. Wires were sticking out, and they found a pair of electrical pliers. That was not shocking, but the other item next to it, a large butcher knife. Whoever was outside my house, let's never meet without me having a loaded gun. Hindsight is 2020. This happened at the end of June, and I'm still coming to grips on what could have happened. My husband was out of town for work, so it was just the kids and I at home. I was in bed reading Reddit on my phone. This Reddit not a good idea when you're naturally jumpy to begin with, and even worse when you are jumpy and home alone. I heard some noises outside. Thinking it was the neighbor's dogs, I brushed it off and continued giving myself goosebumps. All of a sudden, a noise came from by my window. It sounded like someone was moving stuff around in the box of my truck. I grabbed my phone, my machete, and a flashlight, and proceed outside. I was greeted by my neighbor's dog, who had their hackles up and were emitting a low growl. I walked down my steps, turned on my flashlight, and looked around. I call out, "Whoever's out there, come out! I am armed, and I have 2 dogs trained to fetch people." Blackie and Fortune took off towards the tree line between mine and my neighbor's house, and started barking and growling. A kid of maybe 18 came out, took one look at me, and stopped dead in his tracks. I asked him what he was doing on my property, and he replied, "I was dared to come steal something from your yard." That raised warning bells in my head, because no one would be that forthcoming. They would try to tell a lie at first, at least. I told him that my husband and I don't take kindly of people trying to steal from us, and escorted him off the property. He took off running towards a car a little ways down the road and jumped in. Now this is where it gets really scary. 2 weeks after this incident, a police report was filed after the fact because of my machete. I noticed that the flipper for the barbecue was laying on the ground, and I asked my oldest son to pick it up and take it in so I could wash it. He did, as he was told, and then informed me that he found a knife. I asked where, and he led me to the tree line where the would-be robber was hiding and pulled out a huge butcher knife. I went white and grabbed it by the tip of the blade and put it in a Ziploc bag. I called my husband to tell him what I had found, and he said to keep it in a safe place until he got home, and then we would take it to the police station and turn it in. Thanks to the fingerprints and my description, the kid has been caught, but only a trespassing charge was laid against him since he didn't steal anything. He didn't break into my house or even hurt anyone. Looking back and realizing now the danger I was in, as well as my boys, I should have just called the cops and let them deal with it. Law and Order Pizza Crimes Unit. Johnny's Pizzeria is a half block from my house, and Wednesday is cheapo pizza night. I live alone in an okay neighborhood, a few miles outside of a rough but improving city. On many a Wednesday and then Thursday and Friday, I have some pizza. I usually walk to get the pizza, but it was raining tonight, so I drove the half block. The only patron inside, 5'7", dark hair, slight build. American Psycho's Patrick Bateman, without Christian Bale's build or looks, or personality, I reckoned, as I watched him awkwardly engage an employee. He asked him if he had seen Hateful Eight with a break in the middle. He asked him a few times about the break, but never using the word intermission. And the employee looked a bit confused. The guy behind the counter said he saw it on a website with no intermission. I thought maybe Mr. Bateman was an old friend of the employee. He said he was moving to LA in June to pursue a career in stand-up. Based on the counter guy's lack of reaction, I didn't think he knew him. I was bemused, but avoided eye contact with Bateman. My desire was for cheese, pepperoni, mushroom, red sauce, and dough, without the crazy. Bateman then bought a $1.63 cookie, and the woman at the till rang him out and told me my pizza was finishing up in the oven. So I sat at the booth nearest the counter, and Law and Order's theme song and the title credits blared out of the sole large TV in the place. Cookie in hand, Bateman slid up to my booth and said, "You know, these special crime unit cases are all anal crimes. Like crimes involving people getting anally raped." I was aghast. Fuck. Is this guy's idea of a stand-up routine? It needs some work. "Yeah, well, it's the holiest of holes, I guess," I blurted out. In retrospect, I wondered if he got the Tarantino reference. I saw the mental illness in his eyes. Bateman sat, uninvited, at the narrow booth. Our knees knocked. He offered me some of his cookie. "No, sir, thank you. I don't want any of your cookie. You bought it. It's yours." "I want my pizza, goddammit, not a cookie." Bateman stands up and says, "Don't be such a creep. You don't want any of my cookie, that's fine." He then awkwardly staggers around the room, looking for anyone else to engage. The staff are busying themselves. I am his only victim. "So, what is your favorite band?" "Sir, don't take it personally, but I just don't want to talk to you." He hovered around the joint, pacing around, standing in front of the exit. I thought he was gonna stand there to be an obstacle after my food was done, then moving when another patron came in. Apparently, Mr. Bateman ordered a chicken taco and it arrived. Thankfully, he left to eat it. I kept an eye on the ovens and the parking lot to see where he went to. When my pizza was done, I asked the woman at the till whether she knew him, and told her I was disturbed by my interaction with him. She said no, but said that, earlier, a man had come in, ate the sugar packets and bummed a slice from a family eating there. Typical junkie behavior. I said it must be a full moon, and thanked her. I saw that he was at the edge of the parking lot, looking out towards the road, far enough away that I could safely get in my car. I did and pulled out, and saw him staggering up the sidewalk towards my house. He was looking at the houses along the way. When I passed him, he spun around to look at my car. I drove around the block and realized because I was only going to be out for 5 minutes or so, and I'd be coming home with a pizza box in hand, I didn't lock the front door and I had left my phone at home. When I came back around the block, he was still on the sidewalk near my house. It was raining out. Mr. Bateman was, to all appearances, mentally ill. What if he was looking at the houses to seek shelter? What if he was trying the doors to get in? I went to my cousin's and called a non-emergency line for the police and gave a description of the man and asked that they come to my house to make sure it's secure. The dispatcher said, at the end of the call, 2 things. 1, always lock your door, even if you're just going to Johnny's. 2, I hope you got the breadsticks cause they're great. I told the officers what happened and suggested that if he was still in the neighborhood, this might not be the last call they get tonight about him. I'd rather have a torn ego and an intact cornhole than a torn cornhole and an intact ego. What if it hadn't been raining and I had walked? So, anal Mr. Bateman, let's not meet. Stalked by someone I thought was way out of my league. This all took place between a year and almost 3 years ago now. Few people in my life know about this, but I'd figured it'd make a good account for all of you to read. It was early December of 2011, and I was getting ready for a date with someone I'd met on a dating site. Before I even met this person, I'd had mostly positive experiences with people I'd met online, even having been a moderately successful while-it-lasted relationship with a girlfriend I'd met on the same dating site, and being in a very serious but long-distance with frequent visits relationship with someone I met in a game we both played. I figured tonight would be pretty normal. I was jittery, but I have very bad social anxiety and am always nervous about meeting someone for the first time. This guy seemed out of my league. He was about 27 or 28 years old to my almost 22. He was finishing med school. He moved here to the Midwest from India and could speak 5 languages. I was living with family again after the failed LDR forced me back to the US, was going to community college, and was working a seasonal job at a holiday event. In retrospect, I probably should have known something was up. We met for dinner, had entrees and sake, and even after several glasses, I couldn't shake a nervous feeling. He asked if I wanted to go to a Mexican place not too far away for margaritas too, and I stupidly agreed. I got in the car with him. I felt so fucking lucky that I'm not dead after seeing how this panned out. We got there without a hitch, but once we sat down, I noticed the place was totally dead. I think it was 1 a.m. by this point. He started making me super uncomfortable, asking very lewd questions about my past relationships, and getting very sexual and generally putting me off with all his discussion about hookup culture. I told him that that wasn't what I wanted, and it wasn't what I was looking for at all, and this was way too soon for me to be comfortable talking about this. He apologized and took me home. I think I was too drunk at this point to realize getting in the car again was a bad idea. Luckily, he dropped me off without incident. I said I had more fun than I actually did, booze talking, and that I'd text him tomorrow and see him again. I woke up feeling very skeeved out, remembering the night before and thinking how dumb I was. I waited till later in the afternoon. Then I texted him saying that I had fun, but I didn't think that we were quite on the same wavelength, and I didn't want to pursue anything with him. Polite enough, I thought. I did my best to keep blame away from him, and moved on. He started messaging my dating profile after that, and my phone when I didn't answer him there. I told him, again, that I didn't think we were on the same page, and that I wasn't going to reply anymore. This made him go nuts. At least once a day for a month, I would get messages on the site, my phone calls from different usernames and numbers saying it was him, threatening to rape me, to find me. He at one point called me and I thought the number was my doctor. I answered, and he shouted that if he ever saw me on the streets, he would make a monkey rape me. I contacted the police shortly after this started, but they said they couldn't do anything. Okay, great. I blocked every username and number I heard from him on, documenting everything. Eventually, shit dies down by late January of 2012. Then, out of the blue last year, in about June of 2013, I got a call from an unknown number. I've been having a great day and just been on my way home from a hiking trip with my boyfriend, whom I met just after all this shit died down. I did tell him about all of this at some point before this day. For a minute, I didn't know who it was. Then he starts talking about that date and how he's back in the Midwest from the NYC again. It was him. I start panicking, feeling like I'm gonna cry, and I say, "Don't ever call this number again. I'll call the police." I hang up. A few days later, my manager at work says that there was a guy looking for me that seemed really shifty. She described him, and it was him. Name was his, even she wouldn't let him leave his number though. I was so friggin' scared, but I haven't heard from him since either. To this day, I don't sleep with my windows open, even in this heat, unless the boyfriend is here with me. I live on the first floor, he knows where I live. I still get really jumpy at night when the back garden isn't lit. Really fucks with my head, even now. Edit. Since a lot of people are asking, no, I haven't run into him in person again. This is also why my police apparently refused to file a report. They say to me that if I don't have physical proof of harm or him making a threat in person, they can't prove the messages and calls were from him. Edit 2. I appreciate all of the help that this sub has given me in advice on how to track this guy down. Unfortunately, all I have to go on is his first name and age. Truth be told, I'm also quite worried of tracking him down. I don't know if he'd come after me again or not. It's been over a year, but it had been over a year when I got the call and he showed up at my work in June 13. If he's still in the state, well, I definitely do not want to meet him again. A Waffle House tale. Back in June of this year, my boyfriend's aunt passed away from cancer. Jack, my boyfriend, isn't the type of guy to show any sort of emotion at all. He usually expresses his feelings through drinking vodka and getting into arguments with his other guy friends. As it was summer break for the both of us, we decided to go on a road trip to the funeral instead of flying. His aunt only lived 6 hours away, so it wasn't that long of a drive. We left on a Thursday, but got a late start. It was about 8 p.m. that night when we left, and we planned on staying at a hotel. The funeral was the next day. Jack wanted to stop at a liquor store, where he proceeded to get drunk, and I had to drive the rest of the way. About an hour out of St. Louis, where Jack's aunt lived, Jack began to drunkenly complain of being hungry. I couldn't lie. It was 1 a.m., and I was hungry too. So I drove to a Waffle House. Jack and I ate with the rest of the late-night crowd, but since we were off the interstate, it was nothing but truckers and other travelers. I remember Jack was singing with the jukebox, and he began rambling about our wedding dance, blah blah blah. I was confused, but had to force him out of the Waffle House. I reminded myself to never let him drink on a trip again. In the parking lot, I was approached by a girl my age. She looked so normal, not anything like a hitchhiker or a thief. I trusted her immediately, and had no bad don't trust her thoughts. The girl asked Jack if she could ride with us to wherever we were going. Jack was wasted, so I told him to go sit in the car. I told the girl that we were going to St. Louis, and the girl's face lit up. She said that's where she needed to go, and with me having been a missionary for 2 years, could not refuse this girl a ride. We walk back to the car, and I hear this loud shouting from the end of the parking lot. It's a guy, leaned out the window of this big-ass monster-looking truck. He keeps shouting, "Carly, Carly, come back!" And the girl I'm with hides her face in embarrassment. I asked her if the guy was talking to her, and she said yes. She quickly gets into the car, and we get on the interstate. Jack goes to sleep, and just Carly and I. After about 30 minutes of driving, I notice the big monster truck following behind us, and Carly begins to squirm in her seat. Then, the low fuel light starts dinging, and I knew I needed to pull off the interstate and get some gas. Carly's eyes were huge, and I kept eyeing the headlights in my rearview mirror. I pulled up to a crowded gas station off of the highway. It was about 2:30 a.m. at this point, but most of the people there were, of course, truckers, sleeping in their rigs. I pull up to a pump, and the big truck pulls to the outskirts of the parking lot. Carly got out of the car and said she was going to talk to him. Mind you, this entire time, I had no idea what was going on between Carly and the shouting man. She walked over to him, he got out, they started talking. At this point, Jack climbed out of the car and said he needed to use the bathroom. He was sobering up. I had to go in to pay, so I locked up the car and followed him inside. Carly was still talking to the shouting man. Inside, Jack asked me about the girl, and I told him everything I knew, and about the guy following us. Jack, trying to be macho, walked back outside to see if the guy was there, but they were gone. Carly, shouting man, and his monster truck had all but vanished. I looked at Jack, he looked at me. We get in the car, and I drive around to where all the 18-wheelers are parked. The exit to the lot went out to the highway we needed, so I had to go through there. As I was driving, I could see the shadow of Carly running for dear life towards the car. I stopped, and Jack was like, "What the fuck?" Carly was pounding on the back passenger door for me to let her in, as I had forgotten I had locked it earlier. She fell inside the car, and I realized the left side of her face was swollen. She was crying. Then I heard shouting man running up behind the car. Jack was about to get out and do his macho thing, but I floored it out of there. We'd called the police once we arrived at the destination. Turns out that shouting man had been abusing Carly for months and would not let her leave. She finally got away, but chased after her. Carly and I are Facebook friends to this day. It's really strange how things work out. Shouting man's name is Henry, by the way. Moral of the story: never pick anyone up from a Waffle House parking lot, even if they are nice, innocent, and clean. They may still have an insane ex-boyfriend chasing after them that could drag you into something you don't want. Oh, and Jack and I are engaged now. Thanks, Reddit. How I found out someone was living in my house. About a year ago, for the month of June, my family went to France for 4 weeks and left me to tend to the house and take care of the animals. My house is in an interesting location. It's an hour from the campus I go to school on, and a 30-minute drive from my work, and 20 minutes from the main town. My neighbors and I have a few acres in between each other, and the closest house to me is a 10-minute drive. My house is surrounded by farmers' fields, military property, and then miles and miles of BLM land, surrounded by mountains. Sometimes I feel like I live in the house from Courage the Cowardly Dog because of how in the middle of nowhere it is, and how lots of weird stuff happens in it. If you were to Google what a 2-story house looks like, this would be exactly what my house looks like, except it's 1 story. The second story, where all the windows are, is just a ceiling space. There are also lofts in my house, where my landlord was going to put the second story but never got around to it. It was like they tried to build a 2-story house, but realized there was nothing to put the stairwell. There is also a large basement and an attic. I have lived in this house for 8 years, and I've always felt that the house had a weird layout. Next to my room, there's a huge wall that connects to the living room wall, but my room isn't as big as the wall, So there is just a large wall in between the living room and my room. Underneath my room is the stairs to the unfinished basement. Now that you understand the layout of my house, you'd understand why there would be a lot of birds' nests on the roof. The birds congregate on top of the room during the summer because that's when the most bugs are out for them to catch, and because we feed our cat just below. My room acts like a funnel for the noise of them scratching on the roof and running around as well. About 2 weeks after my family left for France, the birds started their scratching noises on top of my roof. They do it. They do it every hour or so, all day and all night. It's a very unsettling sound to hear at 3 in the morning and friggin' annoying. Then I started to hear scratching and bang sounds coming from the wall next to me, which is why I thought we had rats in our walls. My mom assured me over Skype that it was probably just birds on the roof like normal. The next few days I keep hearing the scratching noises and the bang sounds coming from my wall. Finally, I decided that it was time to check the closets and basement for signs of mice or rats so I could buy the proper traps. After checking the basement, I don't find any signs of mice, so I go check the hall closet, which is the only thing in between my living room and my room. It's usually locked because it's full of a bunch of yard tools and my stepdad's shotgun, my archery equipment, and a handgun. It's locked because my youngest brother could seriously injure himself. I assume it's locked, but I still check the handle and it opens. I thought maybe my stepdad unlocked it before they left in case I needed a gun to protect myself. The first thing I notice when I open the closet is that all the tools are moved to the far side and a portion of the closet wall is missing. At this point, I'm freaking the frack out and call my best friend and her dad to come over and check it out. I thought about calling the police, but since I live far from a lot of things, I figured me discovering a hole in the wall of my closet probably wasn't enough to send them out. My best friend's dad and brother come over and use flashlights to look inside the hole. They don't see anything weird or super weird, so my friend's dad gets on his hands and knees and gets into the hole. When he gets out, he has a look of horror on his face and tells us that he found a dirty mattress, a pair of men's-sized jeans, chicken feathers everywhere, and a whole Walmart chicken partially eaten. He calls the police, and they search the whole house and find no one, and nothing out of the ordinary. My friend's dad nails a slab of wood over the hole, and I have all the locks changed. The creepy compartment in my closet has since then been sealed up. The scary thing is that because I work during the day and leave the house unlocked most of the time, the guy who lived in there could have come and gone as he pleased until night when I was home. I have 8 dogs, which is the reason my family needed me to stay home, and I never heard any one of them bark during the time the banging started, which means the man probably lived in my house a long time, and my dogs got used to him. I know there's a lot of horror story narrators out there who want an easy story to use without being copyrighted. Being a generous horror story narrator on YouTube, I will say that you can read my story if you want. Just try to credit me.